Welcome to the Honest Business Podcast. This is the show for ambitious, value-driven business owners who are actively building a business that works for them. Hi, I'm May James, and I'm here to make scaling your business easier and more rewarding than ever. Each week, we will dive into simple, sustainable strategy and pragmatic leadership discussion to support you as you take imperfect action on your entrepreneurial journey. If you want to stay ahead, exceed your growth goals, and have a purposeful, thriving business, then keep on listening. Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are well. I hope this episode is going to be well received. This is great whether you're having a great time in business or whether you are struggling a bit and needing some kind of guidance and love and support. Hopefully this will help you. So today we are talking about, is business really for you? And that is like a doubt that comes into play more often than you'd think for people. Not everybody finds it, but it is a theme that comes across business, especially when you've been in business for a certain length of time. And some people may define that or talk about that as in giving up. Are you going to give up on your business? People think about that a lot, and when I say think about it a lot, it's not that we're consciously thinking it. It's sometimes that something can happen in our business and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, yeah. And we feel a funny way. So the first thing I want to talk about today is the idea that this is normal and it's real and it happens, and it would be infamous of me to say that it doesn't, because it does. And as someone who mentors and supports and coaches and is a consultant for businesses across the board and various different areas for women who are women founders, it comes up. And it doesn't come up necessarily in a way where someone says, I feel like I'm going to give up, or I'm thinking about giving up. It's more subtle than that, and it's more long-term than that, but it is real. So the first thing I want to kind of validate for you is that if you are feeling like, is this just me? Am I being really weird? Am I silly? Is there something wrong with me? I just want to say there isn't, and, it does happen. And the whole point of this episode is to try and help you think about why you're feeling the way you are. Why might you be feeling the way you are? What are the solutions? Are there any solutions? What is the end decision? What can you do? Because sometimes we just feel really lost. So I'm going to walk you through a process that I've taken clients through many a time and it's really been helpful for them. So this is my gift for you today, to really utilize this whenever you may need to, and maybe it's an episode you save and come back to, about what do you need. So the first thing I want you to think about is when this doubt comes in, and I'm really speaking to the people who are listening to this who are literally feeling like, I'm going to throw it all in. I'm going to throw the towel in. I'm sick. I've had enough. I'm annoyed. You're frustrated. Things haven't worked out. Maybe something drastic's happened. Maybe there's a massive issue with the client, or something's happened where you just feel like, I'm just going to give this all up because it's not worth it to me. I want you to think about, how often has this feeling been coming up? Is this a regular feeling? Is this a new feeling? Is it the first time you've ever felt it? Is this something that actually you feel all the time? Have you known for 6 months that you haven't been feeling great about the business, but this is kind of all just coming to a head? We need to establish, how often does this happen for you? And again, this is a personal thing. For some people, you may never ever experience this. You might never experience it until 4 years into business, or 5 years, or 6 years, or 10 years, or, you might experience it from day one. Different people have different ways that this comes up for them. And so it's about you really getting clear with yourself about how often does this happen for you. The next question to move to with that, and I'd encourage you to get the pen and paper going for this episode, because I think it can be helpful if you can write this down, because it is a kind of cathartic exercise for you to then look back and to reflect and to pull things from. The next question is it burnout? We must look at this really seriously from a health perspective. Of when we feel like this, the immediate question needs to be, is this clinical burnout? I mean, it could just be it's burnout, but is it clinical burnout? And the two are very separate, and we will do an episode on this because I think it's important. But are you burnt out? Are you ill? It's really, really important to think about this, because some people will be. If you have pushed your business and have pushed it up that hill that is getting your business started and making profit and getting people to actually know who you are and what you do and selling stuff, you might be burnt out. Your business might be designed in a way that maybe isn't allowing for the energy capacity that you have right now. This episode is not about shaming you. I am not here to make you feel like, oh, you should have done this and you should have managed to prevent this and you should have mitigated this, because I think that's the last thing you need to hear, and it's really damaging for people. I hear this a lot where people are like, oh, well, you should do this and you should do this to avoid that, and it can be really sad and awkward, right? Because you just feel like, oh, that's not what I need to hear right now. Like, yes, I can do that once I feel better, but right now I'm in the depths of it. So I want you to think about, is it burnout? Like, are you struggling with that? And have you ever been burnt out before? Does this feel similar? Does it feel different? If you've never been burnt out before, is this accumulation of years and years? Is it months? Is there something that you've been doing in the last week or two that's really like not been good for you energy-wise? Really encourage you to have a think about that. The next situation and question for you to think about is your life changing around you? Now, this question is a really big one, and this is often the answer behind a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about. So, is your life changing around you? And that can mean not in usual ways. So, I'm not even saying like, you know, you've moved house or you're going through a divorce or something like that. It doesn't have to be this big life event. It can be. But this is also about, is your life changing just in general, day to day? Is there tiny little things? Is there emotional things? Have your children grown up to a point where it's really shifted everything and the whole dynamic of the family has changed? Or maybe, you know, it's that you hit menopause and you feel like, oh my goodness, like this, my world has completely shifted and I'm struggling with just everything in the world, and therefore my business also, as an extension of me, feels that. I want you to really think about, is your life changing around you? And that can be on a micro level or a macro level, but we need to think about that really, really clearly. Again, this exercise is not about us putting blame on things. It's not about us pinpointing like, this has happened because of this, and this means this, and that means that. Like, I don't want you to go down that route because I don't think it's productive. What I want you to do is just get real consciousness around how you are feeling and what that means for you. The next thing to think about is more of a strategic item, but it's important because it means money, is, are sales slow? So quite often, when this feeling comes up of, I want to quit, I've had enough, I can't do this anymore, it's too hard, I don't think I'm cut out for this, I don't think business is really for me, I need to just go and get a job, I'm looking on job adverts on LinkedIn, you know, that kind of vibe often does come from when sales are low. So if you've had a slower period, maybe you're at a time of the year where traditionally your business does have a slower period and you may be really feeling that, maybe cash flow's tight and maybe you've had a tax bill that you hadn't necessarily prepared for in the most effective way, and so now you're really struggling. I want you to think about, are sales slow? Because that is a really it's a tangible thing, right? We can measure that. But what we can't always measure is the effect that has on our brains, on our mindset, and on our internal beings. And as much as we need to learn and can learn how to detach from results and reward satisfaction theory, that isn't easy, and it's not something to start trying to do when you're feeling the way you are. So really kind of repositioning that thought in your head and looking just from a numbers level, because that's really simple for us to see. Are sales slow? Were you, making twice as many sales this time last year, and so now there's this shift that you felt? Has COVID disrupted your business, and maybe it's taken you 2 or 3 years to catch up with that? So maybe you're feeling like this because you're yearning the life of what it was pre-COVID, and now it's post-COVID, and now you're just feeling that. You might have been in survival mode for the last 2 years, and now your body is finally, and your nervous system is saying, hey, we need to just relax into this and slow down a bit. Whatever that is for you, it's all valid. It's all valid. It's all real. It's all okay. I'm not saying it's great, and I'm not saying you have to accept it and feel amazing about it, but I just want you to be present with it and actually acknowledge what it is for you. Leading on from that, the next part of this exploration journey together is to think about, have you switched business models? Really, really important thing, because often we don't make the connection. So you might have switched business models, changed something, pivoted, changed your ideal client, moved to a different offering, adjusted how your team is. If you've made a significant change in your business, often we're so focused on that we kind of forget we have half the time, which I know sounds mad because you're like, well, it's taking up all of my head, all of the time, all the hours of the day. But then when we zoom out and we look at it from a feelings perspective, often we forget the impact that makes and can have on our businesses. So when we are thinking about this, I want you to zoom out and I want you to look at your business over the last 6 months and think, have you switched business models? Have you changed something? What is it that's been going on in the business that is different from what it was, months prior? Now, not all of the things I'm going through might be applicable to you, and you might be like, no, that hasn't, and that's fine. But we're going through this kind of in-depth situation for you to really work out and pull from what that means for you. So maybe you've switched your business model. Maybe you've kind of pivoted you've changed your messaging. And this is a good point. Remember, this can be really minute in terms of the detail, but it can be big impact. So when I'm saying to you, have you switched business models? Might not be, no, you haven't, but maybe you've completely changed who you're serving. Or maybe you've switched up the messaging that you use to attract clients, and therefore that has had a knock-on effect, and therefore that is impacting how you feel. We need to kind of go 2 steps back, or 3 or 4 or 5, in order for us to get to the root cause. Because what happens a lot of the time when we're feeling like this in business is we only ever address the first cause. But the first cause is never really the cause. It's always kind of just the impact, the side effect, the illness, the kind of symptom from what's actually going on. So it's very normal for you to have to dig through this as like an onion, unpeeling the layers, and there's never going to be just one thing. So we've got to take all of this into consideration and synergetically look at it as a living human being, which it is. It's breathing, yeah? Your business breathes life. I say that a lot. So maybe you switch business models. Next thing to ask yourself is, have you got a mindset block or issue standing in your way? Now, again, this might not be obvious, so it's not necessarily that you're sat there thinking, yeah, I know that I need to do this and this is really blocking me. It could be subconscious. It could be that somebody has said something to you 2 months ago and it is still weighing on you. It could be that you feel really heavy about something that you need to deal with in the business, a decision you need to make, and yet you're kind of still struggling to make it months down the line, and so nothing's shifted. I really want you to think about, do you have a mindset issue? Have you got some kind of block and thing that's really weighing you down? Because we need to acknowledge the heaviness that can bring to us, especially over a prolonged period of time, or especially if it's related to money in some way. So have a real think with yourself of, what is the issue going on for me right now? How is my mindset? Because when we look at mindset and growth mindset, and when we've had these conversations with clients before, I rarely have someone who's like, mindset is feeling on top of the world, growth mindset all set, feeling great and ready to go, and then feeling like, is business really for you? Is the doubt of, is it going to work? Them two don't really coexist. I'm not saying they can't, they definitely can, and you can, I'm not saying that that's impossible, but what I'm saying is the general trend, there tends to be something in the mindset piece that is kind of lacking and is kind of festering away, if that's a great way of putting it. It's kind of there and it's circulating and it's constantly there, but you might not be aware as the person that's living it every day. So it might take you to really step back to then find out and uncover what this is for you. So when we think about this, I want you to kind of think about what kind of questions can you ask yourself. I've given you some interesting pointers in this episode so far, but I want you to have a think about what questions can you ask yourself, because I want to challenge your intuition with this. I want you to lean into trust in yourself, because self-trust is a huge part of this journey of entrepreneurship for you, and it's really about, are you prepared to go to the lengths that you need to? Now, what I mean by that is I'm not talking about a work or practical perspective. I'm talking about leaning into this trust piece. And some of that comes and it initiates from being able to ask yourself really honest questions. So I would love for you to list down 1 to 5 key questions that are specific to you. They don't have to be specific, but I don't want to give you these questions because I think the whole point of this is for you to really lean into, what does that mean for you? And really think about that. Let's just really lean into that and think, do you know what? I get what may sit in here and I've been pushing something and suppressing something for a period of time just because it's not felt safe to uncover. And I want to kind of encourage you to feel safe and to, put yourself into a situation, if you can, that you do feel safe enough to explore this. The next thing that we're going to move on to in this episode, and I hope you're enjoying it so far, is to ask yourself the question, do you just need to give yourself some time and space? This is one of the biggest solutions, and you will not think it is a solution, that I can give you, and that has, I don't want to say saved many businesses, because it's not that you're saving them, but it's, it really prevents businesses from folding under. Most of the feelings you have are going to pass. Whatever is holding you back, whatever you're struggling with right now is going to pass at some point, whether that's in a week, a day, an hour, a minute, a month, a year, 10 years. It is going to pass at some point. And so there is an element in all of this that when you're ready to throw the towel in, is about you need to give yourself time to process what's going on. Time is different to space, and I think that's important to differentiate for everyone. And so you need to give yourself time, but you also need to give yourself space. And space for me, when I say give myself space, what that can mean for me is, yes, it can mean not working. Yes, it can mean, distancing myself, but it also can mean taking myself out of some situation to just breathe in a different environment. So that might mean I need to get out the house. It might be that I need to go and stay in a hotel for an evening, 2 evenings, 3 evenings. Maybe I need to go completely 2 hours away, 3 hours away. It can mean a lot of different things, but essentially it can really encourage you to lean into what is your body telling you. Again, let's think about intuitiveness and think about how do we trust ourselves. What is your body needing? Because it might need something. And so, yes, the time is important, but it's also about space and environment and how you're kind of cultivating the growth within yourself. So if you're thinking, yeah, do you know what, that kind of speaks to me, that piece, which it will do, even if you're listening to this and you don't want to quit your business, right? And you're not feeling like you're on that stage. Most of us do need more space and time. We do need that. Let's just talk about how to buy yourself time, because that's really, really key. So when you are trying to buy yourself time, there's so many things we could go into, and I don't think today's the episode for me to go into all of the strategy, because that would be a long episode, but I can definitely touch on a few pieces of the puzzle of how do you buy yourself time. So one of the biggest things you need to look at is what time do you have already, and what's free time? What's free time? What's business development time? What's client stuff? What have you already got obligations towards? Your obligations towards are the things that are at the top of your list. And so you might just be able to just do them and do nothing else. Okay, fine. So you just do that, and then you need to find little pockets of time of how you buy yourself time. From an outward perspective of how do you buy yourself time, it comes from strategy, it comes from a longer term positioning of your business, it comes from designing your business in a way that makes sense. If you're in a position now where you feel like you are bogged down with clients, haven't got any time in the world, and you're turning around and saying to me, mate, I can't take time because I'm fully booked and I've got, 20 calls a week, or I've got 40 calls a week, then we need to go through a process of client elimination. And that is not saying getting rid of clients. It's more about evaluating clients, using a framework and a set process of how do we categorize who is a longer term client, who isn't, who's staying, whose kind of need is going to be satisfied in the container they're already in, who's going to shift, who isn't, who brings the most profit, who isn't, who is the biggest ball ache and who isn't, who kind of makes you feel good when you speak to them versus makes you feel drained and you need to lie down afterwards. Whatever that means for you, I need you to think about that really clearly. And it's not about taking any brash decisions, but it is about us being really clear with ourselves of, okay, we need to start planning. Because what I will say is, even if you cannot implement the plan that you're creating, it in itself will make you feel better. It just always does. 99% of the time. So I really want you to encourage you to think about, okay, once you create a roadmap and a plan for how you're going to get over it, it kind of becomes simple and you start feeling great again. And I'm not saying great as in like you're jumping off the rooftop, but you're not kind of thinking, okay, this is it, my business is going to go under and I've had enough and I can't be a businesswoman. And so really think about like who is here for the long haul and what does that look like? Create clear timelines. I want you to print out calendars with the months on and draw physically on like who's at what point, who's where can you switch meetings around. This is a big one. People have their meetings spread out all over the shop. And one of the best ways to buy yourself time is to really condense them. So go through and look at where they're at and say, okay, who needs to move meetings? How can I make this make more sense for me so that I can work 4 days instead of 5? Or work 6 days instead of 7? Like, depending on where you're at, right? Some of you might only work and might only have calls 1 day a week. And then you feel guilty because you're like, well, I shouldn't feel guilty and burnt out, or I shouldn't feel like I hate my business because I only work 1 day a week, so I should be over the moon. That's okay. That's not, this isn't about who has the hardest life and who has the worst situation. That is not how business works. It's not about how our feelings work. So you need to validate how you're feeling and accept it and know that you're allowed to feel however you feel. And also look at, okay, well, if you only work 1 day a week, but at the minute you can't do that and you need you need to be able to only do half day. It's about how do you do that? And, looking at the options. So think about how can you buy yourself time? This might mean over a longer period, creating a product that you're going to sell for that specific reason. Now, you're not going to tell people that. I mean, you can if you want, but you might create something that's not in your usual remit, but has a clear purpose that is, e.g., something that's passive or something that makes sense for you and buys you IG time. So it's not that we're going to start selling one-to-one, it's that we're going to start selling something else. Maybe you're going to sell a one-to-many style offer or something that allows you to make money without you doing one-to-one back-to-back work. That kind of thing is where you can start and come in and create strategy. And that's what I do with people. So sometimes people will come to me and say, I'm really struggling, or this has happened and now this has changed and how am I going to deal with this? And we create a strategy and create new products if we need to, or pivot what we've already got to help them, to allow them to what they need to get from their business and allow them to really thrive, even though they feel like they aren't. So yeah, I hope you appreciate the honesty in this episode, because I'm really trying to give you like a shortened, condensed, but punchy kind of situation for you to work through that's really tangible and can really help you. So you need to look at how do you buy yourself time. And if you're listening to this episode and you need to buy yourself more time, come and speak to me on Instagram if you're like me. I need more examples of how can I buy myself time, and just put like Honest Business Podcast and tell me that you've come from there and the episode number or the episode title, and I can help you. And I'm very happy to kind of help come up with, how you can buy yourself time, because it is very bespoke depending on the person and the business and where you're at and, your problem and whatever else you're dealing with. So that is kind of the key thing here. And that's my main solution from this whole episode. So if you're only going to take one thing, my biggest thing would be don't make brash decisions and focus on how to buy yourself more time. Because so many people who quit their business, leave their business, then months or years down the line, I'm not saying they regret it, but they think, oh, I could have done this, I could have hung on, if I'd only kept going a bit more, things would have changed and things would have been slightly different, and therefore I probably could have continued by pivoting. And that's really sad. And I'm not saying you shouldn't quit. I think for some people that may be the right situation. But I'm just saying don't make any decisions without fully understanding what the implications are and giving yourself the benefit of the doubt of that you don't know everything. And how you're feeling right now is not how you're going to feel in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time. We want to believe that we are these amazing beings who just know everything. And we don't, right? We don't know all, really, do we? So I think giving yourself, having the intelligence to buy yourself time is one of the most incredible things. And it's, that's what most people do who are extremely high achievement people in the world. So when you look at people like musicians, they are a great example where their craft is so intense, it's so heart, devoting, it's so entrenched in everything. They become the person, but they create an album, right? They create a piece of work and they go all in and they put everything they've got and they have this whole thing, and then they do promo, and then they might go on tour. But there's an element of they then retreat and they then kind of let themselves breathe and live and sleep and do all the stuff that maybe they haven't done or they've neglected. And whilst I'm not saying that that is a good model, and I'm not saying that's what you should do, and I'm not saying that that's something we should be striving for, what I am saying is this has been going on for centuries. It is so normal, and it is very simplistic. Like, think about it. The seasons change. The seasons is a great example of nature doing its thing. Not everything blooms all the time. And so we have to really think about, you don't have to be Superwoman. Many people are trying to create a business that is so far from what nature has kind of helped us to become thus far that it's destined to fail, because we're not superheroes. And so unless you're going to have multiple people in a team who are helping and who are going to be able to pick up sticks when you're not there, it's really unsustainable. Many people in the online industry who are very successful also do this. What I kind of described to you with the music industry example. They, work, graft, they launch, they do something, they run their program, and then they have 6 months off or a year off or, 3 months off, like whatever it makes sense for them. So I want you to think broader on this of the answer you're looking for often is about time and is about buying time. Because if you speak to a lot of people who are successful in your industry, they will tell you that they have felt this at some point. They will have felt where you're at. But the difference is they didn't give up. They didn't say no. They didn't throw the towel in, and they didn't make any rash decisions. And if you make rash decisions, you may regret it later. And that's the bit I don't want you to do. I don't want you to regret the decisions you are making, because that's really dangerous and it's really sad, and it can, it's more damaging from your business than isn't, and that's the biggest thing to do. I am going to touch on, the next thing I want to touch on could be a whole episode in itself, maybe it will be depending on the response to this episode, but this is all about leaving. So if you are going to leave your business and you've decided fully and truly, like, let's just flip to the other side of this, and you've listened to this episode and maybe you've spent time and you've bought the time and all the rest of it, but you still are like, no, I know this is the answer and I know that I'm done and this is it for me. You need to really have a clear understanding and strategy of how you're going to leave if you're going to leave your business. So if you're going to close your business down, or you're walking away, or you're stepping away, or you're going to sell it to someone else. I mean, selling it to someone else is a different thing, but, essentially, if you're leaving your business, you need to really, really get clear on what is the strategy. Now, most people do not, because at this point, they're like completely tapped out. They're not interested. They've had enough, blah, blah, blah. But I truly, truly, from a deep point of my heart, believe that if you are going to leave your business, you must do so on really good terms if you can, because you don't know when you're going to come back. You don't know when you're going to come back. You don't know what job you're going to get in the same industry. You don't know, what your life looks like in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line. It is just so, so important, in my opinion, that you do this well if you're going to leave. Like, you really, really have to, think about this and be really clear and open with your clients. Because if you have got clients and you are going to leave, then you really want to, make sure that they're okay. And I don't think we've got time today to go into the whole ins and outs of how you build that strategy and what that would look like. But you really, really need to think about this. Because it's all well and good in the situation feeling like this is it, this is the end of me, I'm not doing this ever again. But if you have been in business for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, entrepreneurship will be somewhere inside of you. There's a reason you started this thing in the first place. And so for many people, I think it's very dangerous to just walk away and be like, that's it. Or walk away and say, I don't want to do this anymore for myself, but I'm going to do this for someone else. I want to be an employee. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm not shaming quitting your business or leaving it or, whatever. That's fine. People need to sometimes. Sometimes people force themselves to do something that's not ever going to work out for them. And it wasn't meant to, But being really open with yourself about how you leave is so important, because trust me, I have seen some dreadful exits. Really, really, I shouldn't laugh. But I've seen some really bad ones, and I'm laughing kind of out of awkwardness and embarrassment for them, because it makes me cringe. I know you can't see me on this, but I'm like, oh God, it's just not good. And you can you just look from the sidelines and I'm like closing my eyes, trying not to, you just don't want to see it because it's uncomfortable. And yeah, I mean, that's all we're going to say on that one. But I've seen some very interesting, what people believe to be appropriate or okay or good exit strategies, and it just not cutting the mustard for me personally. Anywho, let's continue on, because yeah, we could end up down that rabbit hole. So we've talked about how to buy yourself time. We're talking about leaving if you're going to leave. I now want to pivot back round to your situation right now and what's going on for you. And the reason I've done this is because I don't want to end the episode on how to leave if you're going to leave. Because I believe most of the people listening to this, you're not going to leave, if I'm being brutally honest with you. You just aren't. But you need this episode, and this might help you. And I don't know, if it does help you, message me on Instagram, because I'm glad if this time I've invested in this episode is worth it for you. But I truly don't believe that it is the end of the road for you if you're listening to this. And so that is why I'm not ending the episode on it, because I'm not buying into it. However, let's get back to some other things to think about. So let's breathe and let's think. Is where you're at right now the time to use this whole experience as a point of change? Is it time for you to shift what you're doing in your business? Is it time for you to develop into that higher level self? Is it time for you to switch up the market you operate in? Is it time for you to challenge yourself more? Because maybe you're bored. Maybe you're really, really bored, which again happens a lot in business that people don't talk about. You really need to think about, do you need to pivot? Is it time for a different person? Is it time for May James 4.0, 5.0, 10.0, whatever your situation is in your business name? Like, is it time to switch things up? Because sometimes movement and change can really invigorate us and help us to uncover what is really going on and what is really meant for us longer term. So don't put off pivoting because you've heard people say, you know, like, people who pivot, just, they don't know what they're doing and this, that and the other. Like, that's a whole other conversation, but I don't think you need to think like that. I think what you need to think is, what feels good for me right now? That's what you need to think about. The other thing I want you to also kind of weigh up in your head, and I've told you this episode I was going to challenge you and I was going to kind of tug at different things from you, and you were going to have to use your intelligence and use your emotional intelligence skills and use your intuition, is I want to ask you, are you on the verge of a massive fucking breakthrough? I'm going to say it again. Are you on the verge of a massive fucking breakthrough? Because many of us can be. And this is where it gets so complicated. And if you need that kind of like coach there to really help you, because these are the moments that are really going to test you and really going to like knock shit into you. If I can't really give you a better saying, and that might not make sense, but here my dyslexic brain went there and we're going with it. Like, it almost kind of knocks nails into you of like, oh, right, okay, so many people are on the verge, and I mean the tip, like, it's literally the tipping point of everything that they've wanted to happen, gonna happen, and then they pull back, and they just, like, stop, and they're just moments, like, it's almost like they can smell it, like, it's this, like, tip of your tongue, feeling it in your fingers, tingling sensation of, like, they're nearly there. And maybe they don't have a coach and they don't have support and they don't have someone there to just like shift it and tell them like, just keep fucking going. And then it kind of, you know, just makes you feel crap and you're like, oh God. And from a coach's perspective, like, I've seen this, right? So I've been on the other end of like keeping people going and keeping, you know, allowing people to keep going. I can tell you, like, people have turned around on me and said like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I don't know. And I'm like, okay. And we could get something going, but really, really think about, are you on the verge of a massive breakthrough? Oh my goodness. You can probably tell how like excited I am by this and how much I believe in this and how much I feel so passionately to try and stop people from quitting at this point, because it just truly breaks my heart when I see so many people reach this point and I'm like, you just gotta keep on going. So be really clear with yourself. You might be on the verge of a massive breakthrough. And that hope and that gratitude and that understanding of long-term success and achievement and long-term gratification might just keep you going to that point you needed to. So really, really think about that for yourself. Moving on, because I get really excited about that, is let's just look at zooming out of your life, zooming out of the business, zooming out of everything that you deem to be normal, and get really clear on that. And then look at the life that you have and work out what is going on there. What's good? What's bad? What do you like? What is it that really lights you up? What makes you feel not so good? And really kind of allow yourself to sit in that for a moment and feel where you're at with that. Because it's not necessarily about all the finer details, but it could be that your business, it's not about your business. It might be that it's about your life. But your business gives you the life you have, but maybe you don't want that life. And I've seen this happen before. So this is very common, especially if you have a really successful business and all of a sudden you feel this doubt that's come up for you. So that can come up a lot where you think, oh, goodness me, it just doesn't feel right. And that might not be your business. It might be your life and your life design and how your life is set up and what your life trajectory is looking like. And that's something in that might not be feeling great for you. The next thing to think about, I feel like I've said that a lot, but I'm trying to give you a lot of stuff here to kind of work through for you. I want you to remember something that is so, so key in business. Please just remember this and stick with me on this for forever if you need to. Please remember that you are just working out in this whole business world what works. You're working out what works, you're working out what doesn't. And you're working out what you enjoy and what you don't. And those 4 things sound so simple, but are the 4 cornerstones of pretty much everything you do. Everything you do in your business is funneled into that. And I really think that you have to be clear with yourself of saying, hey, yeah, do you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. I have no clue what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. The direction of the business feels uneasy, unknown. But come back to this idea of, yeah, do you know what, actually though, we're just everybody here. Everybody's winging it. Everybody's working out what works. What works for their specific business, what works for their mentality, what works for their belief system, for the company's mission, for their kind of vision. Everyone's just working out what works. Because just because something works for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And just because it means works for you doesn't mean it works for your business. So this is a great example for me to use for you, is that I have multiple businesses, and some of the things I do in the May James business, which is our consultant and coaching, and it's a consultant company, we, wouldn't work in another business. Doesn't work in one of the other businesses. It just doesn't. Full stop, point blank, sealed the envelope, just won't. And that's got nothing to do with me. It's got to do with the business. So I want you to start treating the business as this breathing, living being that it is, that I've mentioned before. And think about this idea that you are just working out what works and what doesn't. If you failed at something, that doesn't mean you failed at business. It doesn't mean you failed at life. And it certainly doesn't mean that your business has fallen apart. It means that you're just on this journey of working out what works and what doesn't work. And you also, in that same breath, need to work out what do you enjoy. Because the more we can work out for you what you enjoy, the less of these bouts of these feelings you're going to have longer term in terms of years down the line. What you don't enjoy is so, so important. And to caveat the whole lot of that, and to give you a whole dollop of love and a big hug, is to also tell you and remind you that you are allowed to change your mind at any time. Any time in this world, you are allowed to change your mind. That can be about anything. I am giving you total permission to change your mind at any time. I know that I am going to say things in this podcast, and we started this podcast towards the start of 2022. I knew by the end of 2022 that I would probably change my mind on some of the stuff I said. And that held me back for a long, long time from launching a podcast for that reason. Because I was like, it's really long form content. It's there for pretty much ever. And, I like to believe I'm someone who learns a lot and expands my thinking and really is open to changing their opinion. But then that means I'm going to contradict myself a lot. And I found that very uncomfortable. And I was like, I just don't think that's going to work. And then I took my ego out of it and I dusted myself off. And I was like, fuck you, mate. That's not a good enough reason. It's not a good enough excuse to hold helping people back. It's not a good enough excuse to just let yourself drivel in your own shit. Like, fuck off. That's what I literally said. I was like, no, this is not happening. And so I just embraced it and I was like, yeah, okay, that is what it is. It's, that's life, it's business. And if you don't change your opinion, I think it's a very weird place to be and it's not a very productive place to be. So I was like, okay, fine. We're just going to just lean into that. But the key thing with that is I want you to remember is you have to let yourself change your mind. So many business women especially cannot allow themselves to change their mind because they feel like they've failed themselves for the past decisions they've made if they change their mind. You have not. Even if you've invested 100 grand into something and you change your mind and so it means that the 100 grand is worthless, that's okay. Like, it's business, it's okay. Maybe you've invested time. Maybe you spent years building something and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't burn it to the ground and start something else. You can. You 100% can. And I know that is hard. I know it's unpleasant. I know it can feel like and really frustrating. But you are allowed to change your mind at any time. Anytime you fancy, you can change your mind. Now, I swear we're nearly done, but let's keep going because I've got a few other bits for you. A more practical thing I want you to think about of this idea of how do you get over feeling how you're feeling right now is just question yourself on, are you consuming too much of other people's content? The answer is probably yes. Just think about it. Are you consuming too much of other people's content? If you are consuming more than you're creating and you're feeling like this, then that's your problem. You need to just either completely disconnect from social media full stop or create more and stop consuming so much. Because often when we're feeling like this, we then start consuming at an unbelievable rate. An absolutely insanely disgusting amount. Like we just start binging on content, we sit on TikTok and we scroll for hours. I mean, I'm a culprit here as well. I've done that before where like you've just spent hours and you think, what are you doing? And you would never ever normally do that, but it's because you're in a certain place that you're allowing yourself to do so. And so I really want to encourage you to think about, what do I need to do with my social media consumption and content consumption in general? What needs to shift? Leading on from that, I've got 2 things for you. And these 2 things I have mentioned in the episode, but I want to kind of circle back around, end on them, and add a bit more to them. Because these 2 things are like the biggest crux of the problem, if you want to call it a problem. So, first thing, what do you really want? This is the question I want to leave you on and want to kind of give you, because ultimately that's what matters. So I want you to tell me and write down and get really clear on what is it that you actually want from your life, from your business, from your legacy. What is it that you want? Because that's going to give you so many of the answers of the things that I've just told you above and kind of round this up for you. The next thing and the final thing is coming back to this idea of, do you have a cash flow or money problem? And or do you have a sales problem? Because that is the crux of a lot of, if I look at it from a data perspective, and I'm saying using data subjectively here because obviously I'm not saying I have the data, I'm just saying from my objective opinion of, helping so many clients with this, I can tell you that money and cash flow, it tends to be the biggest culprit here. That is the biggest thing. It's money, it's cash flow, it's sales, and as much as those 3 things are very different, depending on what point of business you are, when it comes to this, they kind of all end up being mixed together because that often is what happens. And so I really want you to think about, if you had more clients, if you had more work booked in, if you had projects, if you were fully booked, would you feel differently than you do today? Just sit and think that. Would you feel differently than you do today if you had more clients, more money, more sales, if your calendar was booked out, if you felt like you were fully booked? Because that might give you some answers. It also might not, but it might give you some answers to lean into, to think about how you're feeling. If you are the person who is booked out and you have got all the stuff going on and you're like, you've got all of that on paper, and on paper it all looks good, then I want you to go back to the question of, what do you really want? What do you really want? And that question for you might mean, how much money do you want to make? In how many hours do you want to work? Because that's the key kicker here, right? For you, it might be that, yes, you've got the money, but the money's not enough, and it's also from too many hours. Or the money is enough, but it's too many hours. But for a lot of people, even when you're booked out, people can be booked out, and whatever that means to you, that for some people that's going to mean $1 million a year, some people that's going to mean 50 grand a year, some people it's going to be 30 grand, some people that might be 200, 300 grand a year. Whatever that means for you, I want you to get really clear on what is it that's missing? What is it that's missing? And why do you feel like giving in? Why do you feel the doubt? Why are you doubting what you're capable of? Why are you doubting what the long-term longevity of the business is? Because that's the key thing we need to answer. That is what I'm going to leave you on today. I hope this episode has been enlightening. I hope it's pushed you. I hope you've got some stuff written down. I hope you're going to do something with it, and I hope you're going to action it. And I really, really want to encourage you to lean into where you're at right now, to lean into the challenge, to lean into the problems, to lean into the uncomfortableness of it, and know that you're going to get through it. You 100% will. 100% will. And if you're going through this, feel free to message me on Instagram, because I know that it's hard. So I would be more than happy to say hello, and, not that I can, particularly spend huge amounts of time with you in a not paid container, but I will do my best to speak to you and to hopefully encourage you forward, because I want you to win, and you're allowed to win, and you're allowed to be happy, and things will get better. I promise you. They 100% do. They do every time. It's a non-negotiable. It happens. But it's also normal to be where you're at right now, and to give yourself grace and space and time. I will speak to you soon. Take care. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Honest Business Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you are subscribed. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others and leave a rating and review. To catch up with all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram @may.james_, where I share the raw, uncut, behind the scenes reality of what running multiple businesses every day truly looks like. As always, links and any resources that were mentioned in the episode will be in the show notes below. That's all for this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next time.